Spoopy October, and welcome to the second installment of my Edward Red Mage short story, Snowblind. So now what? The apprentice James asked as we breakfasted on warmed-over leftovers. Are we trapped here?
I wouldn't call it trapped, said Alf. Stuck, yes, but not trapped. There's food and firewood stored here. We should be fine. For a while, anyway.
What happens if we've run out of food before it stops snowing? James continued. Hey, Master Edward, can you make food with magic?
Pfft. Before I could even say anything, Lucas cuffed his cousin in the head.
No, dummy, magic doesn't work like that. Don't you even listen in Temple?
Well, we could go hunting, Alf said. I think some of the fellows might have bows. It's common enough for folks who spend their lives on the road to shoot. In fact, if the snow lets up a bit, I'd go out hunting just for something to do. I brought some books, I suggested. My journal, yes, but also St. Corwin's first book of faith. We could read. My friends gave me funny looks. I realized they probably couldn't read. Well, I could read to you. No thanks, said Alf. No offense, Eddie, but we get plenty of that at God's Day Chapel.
We could play cards, James suggested.
Mother Alice won't like it, Lucas said.
Huh, Mother Alice is too busy preaching to that whore to notice what we're doing.
I grabbed James by the shoulder. The woman's name is Charity, and what she does for a living is no business of a snot-nosed kid like you.
Ooh, do you fancy her? James taunted.
No, I said, I just don't like hearing people treat someone like a thing just because she's poor.
James snorted. Look at how red Master Edward's face is getting. I think he does fancy her.
That's enough, said Alf. James, stop back-talking, or you won't need firewood to keep warm because I'll light up your ass with my hand.
Lucas laughed. Uncle Alf, you're a soft touch. You wouldn't whoop a flea.
As the two apprentices continued to bicker with Alf, and he threatened ineffectively to beat them, I turned to my book. Scratching my hair, I decided I needed to do something about the fleas in the inn, whether Alf would whoop them or not. Luckily, I had a bottle in my satchel that would deal with them.
So, they tell me you're a wizard.
I looked up from sprinkling a potion over a straw-stuffed mattress to see Charity standing beside me. Yes, I am. Finished my apprenticeship last summer, I said.
So, what does that mean? What are you doing? Is that stuff a spell? She asked.
Yes, it's an herbal tincture. I'm trying to drive the fleas out of the bedding, I said.
Well, what can you do besides kill fleas and make lights? Charity asked. I'm guessing you can't control the weather or it wouldn't be snowing like it is.
I shook my head. No, I've not studied weather working. I specialize in what's called green magic.
Which means?
Under most circumstances, I have a very hard time even speaking to women. But once anyone asks me anything about magic, I won't shut up. Oh, well, it means I work with herbs and plants, mostly. Generally healing spells. Let's see. I've got this right here. I reached into the faded wool satchel my mother had sent me off to my apprenticeship with, and I pulled out a small clay jar. Here, this salve, it'll heal dry skin in the winter. Try some. I handed the jar to the young woman. I've also got some treatments for coughs and colds. I smiled awkwardly down at her. It's probably not what people think of when they imagine magic, but you have to admit it's going to come in useful in this weather. Charity rubbed some of the salve onto her hands. Smells nice, she said. Better than some of the things I make, I agreed. Charity laughed. I smiled back. Oh, I do more than just potion making, though, I said. I can tell fortunes with cards. Oh, no, said Charity, shaking her head. Last thing I need to know is my future. Looking back at my past, my future won't be worth seeing. Oh, don't say that, I said. Charity looked up and took my hand in hers. I found myself staring into her warm brown eyes as she smiled with crooked teeth. Hey, sweetheart, I thought we had us an agreement. I stared at the voice and turned to see Gerald Tinker looking at Charity and me. His expression was somewhere between confused and hurt. Oh, I wasn't trying to hire her, sir, I stammered, letting go of Charity's hand. Bye, Edward, Charity said. As she walked away with Tinker, she gave me a half smile over her shoulder. As there was nothing better to do with our time, most of this party spent the afternoon getting drunk, much to the disgust of Mother Alice. She spent her day reading the fables of St. Winifred to a rapt and attentive Peter, and writing in a ledger. When I dared look over her shoulder, I saw she was making an account of everything that our party ate and drank, presumably so we could pay the innkeeper when he returned. If he returned. Hey, this keg's empty, bellowed Smith. He and the quiet, mousy-looking cobbler were sitting shoulder to shoulder by the fire. Somebody bring up another. I was occupied with a house of cards I'd built floating in midair. You, young'uns, I said to James and Lucas, go get us some more beer. The apprentices returned from the stables, struggling under the weight of a barrel, which we quickly tapped and began draining. I frowned at my mug. Ugh, this stuff is awfully sweet, I said. I don't think it's ready. Don't think it's ready? Asked Alf. What's to be ready? It's beer, ain't it? Yes, but it doesn't taste like it's been fermenting all that long, I said. I took another sip and rolled the foamy liquid around on my tongue. And how would you know? Asked the younger of the two potters. You some kind of beer wizard? James and Lucas laughed. Eddie, the beer wizard, they giggled. I guess they'd had more than they were used to. I rent a room over a tavern, I said, shrugging, and I've learned a lot about beer since I've been there. It usually takes about 2 weeks for a beer to finish fermenting, and until then, it still has a lot of sweetness in it. Oh, and it'll give you a worse hangover. Hangovers were something I was an expert on, unfortunately. Moderation has never been one of my strong points. I'm willing to take a chance on it, said Alf, refilling his mug. What else have we got to do? The next morning was cold, miserable, and punctuated by the sounds of the apprentices being sick. I warned you boys, I said, trying to distance myself before I joined them. I wasn't hung-over exactly, but I wasn't feeling particularly chipper. Charity, I called out to the young woman. Could I melt some snow to boil water over the fire? I'd like to brew something up for the boys here. Charity had somehow become the entire party's cook, probably because she and Mother Alice were the only women there, and the priestess, as lady of the temple, considered herself above such work. Oh, of course, Charity replied with a smile. How big a pot do you need? The cold was bitter when I stepped out to gather some clean snow. At least we wouldn't run out of water, as long as we had fuel to melt the snow. I looked around. Everything was white. The road, the ground, the sky, the inn building. The wind in the pines surrounding the inn made a noise like a stormy sea. I couldn't tell if the snow was still coming down or if the wind was just blowing the flakes around. I was used to the big, wet, sticky flakes that fell in my hometown, near the sea, but I'd spent enough time as an apprentice in the mountains to know that these tiny, dry ones were much colder. I was glad to get back inside. "Does it look like stopping?" Charity asked me as I stood warming my hands. "Can't really tell," I said. "Everything is white, and the snowflakes are blowing every which way. I think I could walk off the side of the mountain." Before I realized what I was doing, I shrugged off my cloak. "And even if the snow has stopped falling, it's not going to melt. That's for sure. It's freezing outside. We're stuck here." "Well, I've got some good news," she said. She held out her left hand, where a twisted band of copper wire rested on one finger. "Gerald says he's going to take me with him. When he goes over west, he's going to marry me." I wasn't sure what to say, so of course I said something stupid. "Marry you? Do you even want to marry him?" Charity actually laughed. "Are you jealous, beer wizard? Listen, Gerald may not be as young, tall, or pretty as you, but he's a good man. He's always been kind to me, treated me well, and he's hard-working. One good, kind fellow is worth a dozen young, pretty ones, especially when the young ones haven't any money." I grinned at the girl. "I guess your future's looking better than you thought." Third God's Day, Marina's, 37th Herald. Once I brewed up some tonic for the boys, they felt better. I shared it out with anyone who'd had too much to drink last night, which was almost all of us. I think the name Beer Wizard is going to stick. No sign of the innkeeper's family returning. Not that that's a surprise. No one could travel in this weather. I'm still worried that they didn't leave of their own will, though. James got bored once he stopped puking and climbed up into the loft where the innkeeper's family slept. He said he was looking for extra blankets, but he found a lot of clothes up there in chests as well. At least, a lot of clothes to be left behind by working folk traveling in the winter. Fourth Earth Day, Marinas. Still white all over outside. No traveling. Alf, Gerald Tinker, the peddler, and a few more of the hardier fellows went hunting. They tried to get me to go with, but city boy that I am, I've never pulled a bowstring in my life. They brought back a deer, which made for a very good dinner, even though we had to wash it down with melted snow water. We've drunk all the beer. Fourth Water Day. No change in weather. We all heard a pack of wolves howling outside the inn last night. They were probably digging up yesterday's deer guts. The hunters went out again, but only came back with a few rabbits. Watery stew for dinner. The wolves must have scared the deer. Fourth Green Day. Snowed hard today. Alf, Gerald, Peddler, Smith, Potter, Cobbler, and the priestess servant Peter all went out hunting. No one caught anything. And worse, Gerald is lost. He got separated from Alf, and he hasn't come back yet. Of course, Charity wanted us to go look for him, but there's no chance of finding him in the dark, and every chance of falling off the mountainside. Hopefully he found shelter. Fourth Wing Day. Still snowing. No sign of Gerald Tinker. No tracks to follow. Peddler and Smith went out hunting again, but no one else wants to. You write in that thing a lot, don't you? I set down my quill and looked up at Charity. It's something to do, I said with a shrug. The red-haired woman sat down on the bench next to me. For a few minutes she was silent, twisting the ring on her finger. Why haven't you gone out hunting any? She asked at last. Same reason the apprentices haven't, I expect, I said. I'd be terrible at it.
You couldn't use magic or something?
I shrugged. Never tried. And honestly, now that Gerald's gotten lost... Charity stared across at the fire.
Gerald's dead,
isn't he? She said, in the flat tone of someone who's seen a great deal of suffering in a short lifetime. I winced, hated myself for being so thoughtless as to mention him. We don't know that, I began. Charity shook her head.
It's my luck, she said, always bad. I was going to go over the plains with him where nobody knew me. Start over. I was so lucky. I mean, who else would want to marry a whore? But I should have known it was too good to be true. He's dead.
I opened and closed my mouth a few times, wishing I could say something, neither patronizing nor insensitive. Finally, I settled on, I'm sorry, Charity. I hope he comes back. But he didn't. 4th Beast Day. Still no sign of Gerald Tinker. Half the men in the party have started making advances toward Charity. I have nothing to offer her. No money, anyway, so I'm staying away. She's talked to some of them, but seems to be taking her time making up her mind which one she's going to latch onto. I think she's leaning towards going with Peddler. He's got a cart full of goods. He's most likely to be willing to leave the kingdom with her. Plus, he plays the lute. And he isn't bad looking if you discount the eye patch. Still, it seems awful for her to have to throw herself at a stranger like this. Poor girl. I grew up in a house full of sisters, but somehow I never really thought of how hard life is for a woman without male family to protect her. If she does choose Peddler, I hope he treats her well. At least he's the best hunter of the group. Went out on his own this morning, before the rest of us were awake, and brought back a deer before noon. Full belly tonight. I should sleep well. 4th Man's Day. Mother always said that I'd have nightmares if I ate too much before bed. I guess she was right. Can't really remember what happened, except that there were wolves howling and blood on the snow. I woke up sweating under my blankets. Wolves were howling outside the inn for real. Took a while to get back to sleep.
You really love that book, don't you? Charity asked me.
You must be bored to want to talk to me, I said. Everyone else here seems to think me an annoyance. They stay away, so I can't give them a lecture on herbalism.
Charity laughed. I'm just nosy. What are you even writing in that thing?
Everything that's been happening.
Why? Are you afraid we're all going to freeze to death out here? And we'll need to leave a record of what happened?
No, I shrugged. My master had me journal every day as an apprentice. It's a habit. I smiled at the red-haired woman. How are you doing? I mean, are you all right? Inwardly, I kicked myself. How could she be all right? An abandoned prostitute surrounded by lecherous men. Mother's Alice servant might be labeled a half-wit, but I felt like I had less sense than he did. At least he didn't go around saying stupid things and hurting girls' feelings.
Oh, don't worry about me, Charity said, fingering her bead necklaces. I spent last night with Forrest.
With who? Who's Forrest?
The peddler. His given name's Forrest. He says we can go west together if I want. Best offer I'm going to get. Almost everyone plans to go back east, and some of these guys have wives at home. She chuckled. I'm desperate, but I'm not stupid. Besides, I don't want to go east. She fidgeted some more with her beads, twirling a pendant in her fingers. Smith and Cobbler are planning on staying in Trader's Pass. Cobbler's inherited a shop or something. But I know better than to think either of them would want me.
Why not? I asked.
She gave me an odd look. Don't tell me you haven't noticed, she said.
Noticed what?
Oh. Blushing, I shut up as I realized what she meant. They were a couple. That's it, Eddie, I told myself. You are officially a moron. What about, Mother Alice? I asked, trying to hide my embarrassment. I thought maybe she'd offered you a place in the convent. Huh. And what use would I be there? They make books in that place. I can't even read. I could teach you, I offered. I mean, if you wanted me to. And I wouldn't accept or expect anything from you in payment or anything because, peddler, you have an agreement if you still want to go west with him. I was so awkward. Where is peddler anyway? He went out hunting this morning before anybody was awake. I woke up and he was already gone. He won't mind if I spend time with you, Eddie. Everyone here knows you're a harmless little bookworm. Fourth Man's Day continued. Snowing hard again. Spent the day teaching Charity her letters. Smith, Potter, and the others asked me to go hunting, but I said no. Not sure now if I should have gone. Smith didn't come back. Potter says he ran off after a deer he'd wounded, and they got separated in the snow. Everyone figures Smith's a goner, considering Tinker never came back. I think Cobbler may be in shock. He's sitting staring at the fire, not saying a word. People are starting to think we might be cursed or something.